The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window of the brick house Eleanor Price had called home for more than 40 years. At 70, she still liked to start her day with a pot of Earl Grey poured into the same chipped mug she'd used since her husband William was alive. This house wasn't just four walls and a roof. It was the place where Lisa had taken her first steps, where William had built the back porch by hand, where family photos lined the hallway like a living diary. Before we dive into her true stories, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Hearing from people around the world makes these stories even more powerful and reminds us how connected we all are. The crunch of tires on gravel snapped Eleanor out of her thoughts. She peered out the window and frowned. Her daughter Lisa was getting out of the car, trailed by her husband Mark. They hadn't called ahead. Eleanor's unease deepened when she noticed Mark carrying a folder stuffed with papers and a metal measuring tape. Before Eleanor could open the door, Lisa was already knocking. When Eleanor let them in, Lisa's voice was clipped businesslike. "Mom, we need to talk." Mark didn't bother with pleasantries. He walked straight into the living room and dropped into William's old recliner as if he owned it. Eleanor's jaw tightened. She set the teapot down on the coffee table and looked directly at her daughter. "Talk about what Lisa perched on the edge of the couch. Mom, this house is too big for you. You can't keep up with it anymore. Mark and I think it's time you moved into a retirement community. It'll be safer and easier." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "This house is mine. I've kept it just fine. Nobody is moving me anywhere." Mark leaned forward, wearing that practiced phony smile Eleanor had never trusted. "Mrs. Price, think about it. Lisa and I could really use the space once we start a family. You don't want to be rattling around in this place all alone, do you?" Eleanor stood up, her back straight. "First of all, don't Mrs. Price me like I'm a stranger. Second, this is my home, not yours. And third, get out of my husband's chair." Lisa's tone sharpened. "Mom, why are you being so difficult? We're trying to help you." Eleanor laughed, bitter and short. "Help, real help, doesn't come with legal papers and a measuring tape." That's when Mark slapped the folder down on the coffee table. He flipped it open, revealing typed contracts and forms. "We already spoke to an attorney. All we need is your signature. We'll handle the rest." Eleanor adjusted her glasses, scanning the pages without touching them. Then she looked Mark square in the eye. "You walk into my house with paperwork I never asked for and expect me to sign it on the spot. Let me make something crystal clear without my consent. Those papers are worthless. You have no authority here." Silence pressed heavy in the room. Lisa finally tried another angle. "Mom, please, don't make this harder. You've been forgetful lately. Remember last week you left the stove on?" Eleanor's voice snapped like a whip. "That is a lie. And don't you dare question my memory just to push your agenda." Mark pushed himself out of the recliner, frustration spilling through his calm facade. "You're being unreasonable, Eleanor. This isn't safe for you anymore." Eleanor raised her hand, cutting him off. Her voice was cold steel. "You are trespassing in my house. If you don't leave right now, I will call the police." For a moment, nobody moved. Lisa glanced at Mark, clearly shaken. Mark gave a low, sarcastic chuckle, trying to mask his nerves, but Eleanor could see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. She stepped closer, her voice lower but firm. "Lisa, I raised you here. Every birthday, every Christmas morning, every scraped knee, this home holds all of it. And you expect me to walk away just because it's convenient for you? No. If you and your husband can't respect that the door is right there." The only sound was the clock ticking on the wall. Finally, Mark snatched the papers back into his folder, muttering, "This isn't over." The front door slammed behind them, and the house was quiet again. Eleanor sank into her chair, exhaling slowly. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from adrenaline. She knew this was only the beginning of a fight, but for the first time in months, she felt a spark reignite inside her pride, determination, and the refusal to be treated like she was helpless. "Not over," she whispered to herself. "You're damn right it's not. But this time I'm ready. If you're still watching, comment 1, so I know you're still with me." After Lisa and Mark stormed out, the house fell into that heavy kind of silence only an old home could hold. Eleanor Price sat at the kitchen table, staring at the half-empty mug of tea. The echoes of her daughter's words still stung. "You've been forgetful. You can't keep up with it anymore. Forgetful, helpless. If only Lisa knew. Eleanor's eyes drifted to the photographs on the wall. There was Lisa at 6 years old, missing her front teeth, holding up the blue ribbon from her first spelling bee. Another showed Lisa in her cap and gown, beaming with pride, while Eleanor clutched her diploma as if it were her own. William had snapped that picture, his grin as wide as the horizon. It hadn't been easy getting Lisa to that stage. Back in the late 70s, Eleanor had worked nights at the local bakery, rolling dough until her hands cracked. By day, she took in mending jobs, hemming pants, patching holes, stitching prom dresses for the neighbors' kids. Every extra dollar went into a coffee tin labeled college fund. William, steady and quiet, drove a delivery truck and often picked up double shifts just to make ends meet. They rarely had vacations. New furniture was a luxury, but they never once let Lisa see the struggle. She was their only child, their greatest investment, and Eleanor had promised herself that Lisa would have opportunities she never had. She remembered the winter when Lisa was 10 and the furnace had broken down. Money was too tight for repairs, so Eleanor bundled Lisa in 2 pairs of socks and extra sweaters, pretending it was all part of a fun camping adventure. She heated bricks in the oven, wrapping them in towels to slip under Lisa's blankets at night. Lisa giggled, thinking it was a game. Eleanor never let her know that she and William stayed awake, teeth chattering to make sure their daughter stayed warm. It was sacrifice. That's what parenthood was supposed to be. Her chest tightened as she remembered William's steady hand on hers the night he passed. He had battled heart problems for years, and though Eleanor had braced herself for the possibility, the final goodbye had gutted her. They'd been married nearly 5 decades, and suddenly she was navigating everything alone. Still, Eleanor held on to one comfort: she believed that losing William would bring her and Lisa closer. Surely grief would knit them together. Surely Lisa would understand her mother's need for family, for connection. But the opposite happened. As Lisa grew older, her visits became less frequent. Calls went unanswered, holidays shortened to quick dinners with excuses about work or obligations with Mark's side of the family. Eleanor kept setting the table for Sunday dinners anyway, hoping tradition would tether her daughter back to her. She polished the silverware William had left, baked Lisa's favorite pies, even bought fresh flowers from the farmer's market. Some Sundays Lisa came. Most Sundays she didn't. And when she did, it wasn't the same. She spoke in clipped tones, as if Eleanor were an obligation to check off a list. Mark usually commandeered the recliner and the remote, barely acknowledging Eleanor's presence. She swallowed her resentment, telling herself it was better than being alone. But nothing compared to tonight's confrontation. The words Lisa had spoken cold, rehearsed, cut deeper than any absence ever had. Eleanor's gaze fell on the embroidered tablecloth folded neatly in the cabinet. She'd stitched it the year Lisa turned 16, staying up nights to finish it before her birthday. Every flower on that cloth represented hours of labor and love. It was supposed to be an heirloom. Would Lisa even care to keep it, or would she toss it aside like clutter? Her throat tightened. How had things come to this? She remembered Lisa at 5 years old, running barefoot in the backyard, fireflies glowing around her. "You're my hero, Mommy," she had whispered once, curling up in Eleanor's lap. The memory burned like a cruel joke now. How did a daughter who once saw her as a hero now see her as a burden? Eleanor sighed and rubbed her temples. The truth was bitter. Maybe she had sacrificed too much. Maybe by giving everything she had, raised a woman who thought love was measured in convenience and property. But then again, Eleanor straightened in her chair. It wasn't over. The same strength that got her through sleepless nights at the bakery, through cold winters without heat, through William's passing, that strength still lived inside her. Lisa might have forgotten it. Mark might have underestimated it. But Eleanor knew better. She stood, poured out the cold tea, and refilled the kettle. Tomorrow she would call Attorney Victoria Carter, the name her neighbor had once recommended for elder law. It was time to get her affairs in order, not to surrender them, but to protect them. As the kettle began to hum, Eleanor looked once more at the family photos. She touched Lisa's smiling face in the frame. "I gave you everything," she whispered, "and I'll be damned if I let anyone take from me what I bled to give." The tea whistled. Eleanor turned off the stove with a steady hand. She wasn't forgetful. She wasn't weak. She was Eleanor Price, and she still had fight left in her. The next morning, Eleanor woke with a heaviness in her chest. She hadn't slept much. Lisa's words from the day before kept circling in her mind like vultures. You've been forgetful. You can't keep up with it anymore. Forgetful. At 70, Eleanor's mind was sharper than half the people she knew. She still balanced her own checkbook, read the paper every morning, and never missed her weekly bridge game. But the seed had been planted. That was the cruel genius of gaslighting. You didn't need proof, just a suggestion. By late afternoon, Lisa called. Her tone was syrupy, too sweet. Hi, Mom, just checking in. Did you remember to take your blood pressure pills today? Eleanor tightened her grip on the receiver. Yes, Lisa. I've taken them every day for 10 years. That's good, Lisa said quickly. You know, sometimes older folks forget these little things. Mark just worries about you, that's all. Older folks. Eleanor bit back a retort. She wasn't some stranger. They were talking about her. 2 days later, Lisa showed up with a stack of glossy brochures. She spread them across the kitchen table like a real estate agent. The pamphlets were filled with smiling seniors playing bingo shuffleboard and painting watercolors. The words, Comfort Safety Community, were stamped on every page. Look, Mom, doesn't this place look wonderful? Lisa chirped. You'd have people your own age around, and nurses on duty 24/7. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing. Eleanor picked up one of the brochures and scanned it. I've lived in this house for 40 years without a nurse on duty. Why would I need one now? Lisa's smile faltered. Mom, please don't be stubborn. We just want what's best for you. Eleanor laid the pamphlet back on the pile. What's best for me is staying in the home your father and I built together. That's not negotiable. Lisa sighed, gathering up the brochures with exaggerated patience. You'll come around. It's just a matter of time. The following weekend, Mark tagged along with Lisa again. This time, he came armed with a new story. Mrs. Price. He began settling once again into William's recliner without asking, the neighbors mentioned. You left your garage door open all night last week. Anyone could have walked in. That's dangerous. Eleanor stiffened. That's not true. I closed it myself. I even checked twice before bed. Mark tilted his head, feigning concern. Maybe you just don't remember. It happens, you know. Lisa told me about the stove incident, too. Eleanor's stomach churned. Lies stacked on lies meant to chip away at her confidence. She stood tall, folding her arms. I know exactly what I do in my own home. Don't twist things to make me doubt myself. Mark's smile slipped for a fraction of a second before returning oily as ever. We're just trying to help. Eleanor looked between them, her daughter avoiding eye contact, her son-in-law oozing fake charm, and realized this wasn't just meddling. It was strategy. They wanted her to believe she was slipping. If she doubted herself, she'd sign anything they put in front of her. That night, Eleanor sat in her late husband's chair, staring at the family photos lining the mantel. This is how it begins, she thought. Not with outright threats, but with whispers designed to make her question her own mind. She remembered a phrase William used to say, when people can't beat you with truth, they'll try to beat you with doubt. Eleanor wasn't about to let that happen. She opened a notebook from the kitchen drawer and began writing things down, what time she took her pills, when she locked the doors, even when she watered her African violets. Every detail would be recorded. If Lisa or Mark tried to twist her memory again, she'd have proof. The pen scratched across the paper as Eleanor wrote the date October 12, 2025. Next to it, she added garage door closed at 9:15 p.m., checked twice. She closed the notebook with a firm snap. If they wanted to play games, she'd meet them with facts. The following week, when Lisa dropped by, she casually said, Mom, did you remember to take your medicine yesterday? You seemed a little out of it on the phone. Without a word, Eleanor opened the drawer, pulled out the notebook, and flipped to the page. She pushed it across the table. Read it. Lisa blinked. What is this documentation? Eleanor replied evenly. Yesterday at 8:00 a.m., blood pressure pill, noon vitamin D, 5 p.m., walked 2 laps around the block. You see, Lisa, I remember everything just fine. Color rose in Lisa's cheeks. Mom, you don't have to be defensive. No, Eleanor said sharply. I have to be prepared. There's a difference. For the first time in months, Lisa didn't have a comeback. She shoved the brochures back into her purse and muttered something about being late for dinner. As the door closed behind her, Eleanor allowed herself the smallest of smiles. They thought they could gaslight her into submission. They were wrong. This was her home, her life, her dignity, and she wasn't about to surrender any of it without a fight. The knock came on a Tuesday afternoon, sharp and insistent. Eleanor Price set down her gardening gloves and wiped the soil from her hands. When she opened the door, she wasn't surprised to see Lisa and Mark standing there again. But this time, they weren't alone. Behind them stood a man in a pinstriped suit, briefcase, in hand his expression polished but predatory. Mom Lisa began trying to sound casual. "This is Mr. Harlan. He's an attorney who's helping us with some of the paperwork. We just need a few minutes of your time." Eleanor's jaw tightened. She hadn't asked for any attorney. She hadn't asked for any paperwork. Her gut told her this man wasn't here for her benefit. Mark stepped in without waiting for an invitation, his voice slick. "It'll only take a moment, Mrs. Price. We're here to make sure everything transitions smoothly. This house really is too much for you, and we're just trying to take the burden off your shoulders." Eleanor planted herself firmly between them and the living room. "First off, you don't come into my home without permission. Second, you don't bring strangers into my house to talk about my property. If you think you're going to push me around, you've picked the wrong woman." The so-called lawyer cleared his throat. "Mrs. Price, I assure you I'm only here to assist. These documents will protect you." Eleanor cut him off. "Protect me? From what?" "From my own daughter and her husband." Lisa flushed, her voice rising. "Mom, don't be dramatic. We're just trying to make sure things are handled properly. You don't understand all the risks of living here alone." "I understand more than you think," Eleanor shot back. "And I also understand trespassing laws. You have about 10 seconds to explain why this man is in my house before I call the police." Mark's smile faltered, but he pressed on. "Look, Eleanor, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Either you sign these papers now or we'll have to pursue other legal options. You don't want it to come to that, do you?" Eleanor's spine straightened. She felt William's steady hand in her memory, the same hand that had helped her through every storm. "I want you out of my house. All of you. Now." The fake lawyer shifted uncomfortably, clearly not used to being challenged. "Ma'am, perhaps we should—" "No, ma'am." "No nonsense," Eleanor snapped. "You're standing in my home without my consent trying to trick me into signing something. That's elder abuse, and I know it when I see it." She pulled her phone from her pocket, her thumb hovering over the keypad. "Here's how this is going to go. You're going to walk out that door, and I'm going to call someone who actually works for me, an elder law attorney named Victoria Carter. She's going to take a look at whatever papers you're trying to shove under my nose, and if she sees one word that doesn't belong, she'll have the police at your doorstep." The silence was deafening. Lisa shifted from foot to foot, her face pale. "Mom, please, you don't need to make a scene. This is my house," Eleanor said firmly. "If anyone's making a scene, it's you and your husband parading strangers through it like you own the place." Mark's mask of charm slipped, revealing the simmering anger beneath. His voice dropped to a growl. "This isn't over." Eleanor met his glare head-on. "You're right. It's not. But from this point on, we're going to do things my way, which means through my attorney, not some stranger you dragged in off the street." The man in the suit muttered something about coming back another time and quickly retreated toward the door. Lisa trailed behind, biting her lip while Mark lingered, trying one last shot. "You think you're stronger than you are, Eleanor. One day soon you'll realize you can't handle all this." Eleanor's reply was cool and measured. "The day I can't handle it will be the day I decide. So not you. Don't come back here without an invitation." When the door finally shut, Eleanor leaned against it, her pulse racing. She wasn't naive. She knew Mark wasn't going to give up that easily. But the battle lines had been drawn. She walked straight to her desk, opened her address book, and dialed the number her neighbor had given her weeks ago. Victoria Carter's office, a cheerful voice answered. "Yes," Eleanor said, her voice steady now. "This is Eleanor Price. I need to set up a consultation as soon as possible. It's about protecting my home and myself." As she hung up, Eleanor allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. They thought they could ambush her with a phony lawyer and scare tactics. Instead, they had pushed her into the arms of someone who actually knew how to fight back. For the first time in a long while, Eleanor felt something powerful stirring inside her. Not fear, not despair, but resolve. The kind of resolve that had carried her through nights of exhaustion, years of sacrifice, and the grief of losing William. They wanted a fight. Eleanor Price was ready for one. The following morning, Eleanor sat at her kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee, the events of yesterday replaying in her mind like a courtroom drama. Lisa's anxious face, Mark's thinly veiled threats, the so-called attorney fumbling under her glare, it had all felt surreal, but it was also clarifying. For the first time, Eleanor knew she needed more than just grit. She needed proof. She needed protection. She thought of William. Even in death, her husband had always found a way to steady her. He'd been practical to the core, never flashy, never careless. A delivery driver for most of his life, William rarely spoke about money, but Eleanor remembered how meticulous he was with bills, how he kept files organized in his desk drawer, each folder labeled in his careful handwriting. Something tugged at her memory. A folder she had seen but never opened. It had William's initials on the tab, WP. She had assumed it was just old tax returns or receipts. Now, with her daughter and son-in-law circling like vultures, she wasn't so sure. She pulled open the desk drawer in the den, the one William had used for decades. Inside were the usual things: stamps, a half-empty checkbook, and old calculator. Beneath them, buried under envelopes, was the folder. Thick, locked with a tiny brass clasp. Her heart pounded as she searched for the key. She finally found it tucked inside a worn Bible pressed between Psalms 23 and 24. Typical William, always hiding things in plain sight. When the clasp clicked open, Eleanor drew in a breath. Inside were neatly arranged documents, every page perfectly aligned. Bank statements, property deeds, and on top a legal document that made her hands tremble, the Price Family Living Trust. She skimmed the words, her vision blurring with tears. The trust had been updated just 6 months before William's passing. Every asset, this house, a small rental property on the other side of town, savings accounts Eleanor didn't even know existed, was placed under her sole control. And then came the line that stopped her cold. If at any time my daughter Lisa Price demonstrates neglect, abuse, or undue influence over her mother, she shall be excluded from any inheritance. Final discretion remains with my wife, Eleanor Price. Eleanor set the paper down, her chest tight. William had seen this coming. He had known somehow that Mark's charm was hollow and that Lisa might fall under his sway. He had written protection into the very foundation of their estate. As she flipped through the folder, Eleanor found more surprises. There was a modest portfolio of stocks that had grown over the years, dividends quietly accumulating. There was the deed to the house Lisa and Mark rented, the same one they had bragged about buying, but William had actually retained ownership. Rent from the tenants had been deposited monthly into an account Eleanor had never touched. And then, at the bottom of the folder, a letter in William's familiar, steady handwriting. My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. I didn't tell you everything while I was alive because I didn't want you to worry. You spent your life giving everything to me and to Lisa. I wanted to leave you security, freedom, really, so you would never feel powerless. I've seen how Mark looks at what we built. I don't trust him. That's why I structured everything this way. You hold the keys now. Use them to protect yourself. And remember, strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply stands and refuses to move. Forever yours, William. Eleanor pressed the letter to her chest. Her tears came hot and fast, but they weren't just grief this time. They were gratitude, relief, and something else, resolve. William hadn't only left her money, he'd left her the power to stand her ground. She carefully returned the documents to the folder and locked it again. Then she picked up the phone and dialed Attorney Victoria Carter's office. When Victoria answered, Eleanor's voice was steady. Ms. Carter, I found something. It's a family trust. My husband left everything to me, and he put in conditions about Lisa and Mark. I want to make sure it's ironclad. Victoria's tone sharpened with interest. That's excellent news, Mrs. Price. Bring everything to my office. We'll secure it properly and file what needs to be filed. If your daughter and son-in-law try to challenge you, we'll have the law on our side." Eleanor hung up her hands, no longer trembling. She looked around her living room, William's chair, the photographs on the mantel, the embroidered tablecloth folded neatly in the cabinet. For weeks she had feared losing all of it. Now she realized she held more control than she ever knew. Mark thought she was just an old widow, weak and forgetful. Lisa thought she could guilt her into surrender. But neither of them understood the truth. Eleanor Price wasn't a victim. She was the guardian of everything William had built, and she wasn't about to let anyone strip it away. 3 days after discovering William's trust, Eleanor Price felt steadier than she had in months. The folder, now safely stored in a lockbox at Attorney Victoria Carter's office, had given her more than legal protection. It had given her peace of mind. For the first time, she knew she had the leverage to defend herself. Still, she wasn't naive. She knew Lisa and Mark wouldn't just slink away quietly. That prediction proved true on Saturday morning. The doorbell rang as Eleanor was folding laundry in the den. When she opened the door, her daughter stood there holding 2 flattened cardboard boxes. "Morning, Mom," Lisa said, trying for a smile. "I thought I'd come help you pack." Eleanor stared at the boxes, her heart lurching. Pack for what?" Lisa stepped inside without waiting for permission. "For the move, Mom. I know it's a lot to handle by yourself, so I figured I'd get a head start. We can start with your clothes, maybe the dining room after." She set the boxes on the table and began opening one with brisk, efficient movements, like she was organizing a project at work. Eleanor's voice hardened. "Lisa, put those boxes away. I'm not moving." Lisa barely looked up. "Mom, we already talked about this. You'll be so much better off in a community with people your own age. It's not safe for you to stay here." Eleanor felt her chest tighten, but she steadied her breath. "What's not safe is my own daughter barging into my house and trying to pack up my life like it's yard sale junk." Lisa flinched at the sharpness of her mother's tone, but kept going. She pulled a framed family photo from the mantel. Lisa, at 10 years old, gap-toothed smile, William's arm draped proudly around her shoulders. Without ceremony, Lisa dropped it into the half-built box. "Careful with that," Eleanor snapped, snatching the photo back. "That's your father's arm around you. That's our life. Don't you dare treat it like trash." Lisa's eyes softened for a flicker, but the resolve quickly returned. "Mom, I know this is hard, but you'll thank me later. Mark and I." "Mark and you," Eleanor cut in, her voice rising, "are thinking about yourselves, not me. Don't stand there and pretend this is about my safety. It's about that house. It's about control." Lisa opened her mouth but shut it again. Instead, she turned to the china cabinet. "These dishes are too delicate to pack alone. I'll wrap them." Eleanor stepped between her daughter and the cabinet. Her hands trembled, but her stance was firm. "Not one plate leaves this house, not one teacup, not one stitch of linen. You hear me?" Lisa's face flushed, her composure cracking. "Mom, you're being unreasonable. You don't even understand what's best for you anymore." Eleanor's voice dropped to a low, dangerous calm. "I understand perfectly. I understand that my own child is standing in front of me with boxes trying to erase the life I built with her father. That's not love, Lisa. That's betrayal." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. For a long moment, Lisa just stood there, the cardboard box limp in her hands. Finally, she muttered, "You'll see I'm right eventually," and headed toward the door. Eleanor followed her, holding the photo frame tight against her chest. At the threshold, she stopped her daughter with one last command. "Don't bring boxes into my house again. Next time you try, you won't be leaving with just hurt feelings. You'll be leaving with a police escort." Lisa froze, eyes wide. "You'd call the cops on your own daughter. I'd call the cops on anyone who tries to steal my life," Eleanor said firmly. "Blood doesn't give you the right to trample me." Lisa's lips parted as if to argue, but no words came. She turned and walked briskly to her car, slamming the door behind her. When the silence settled again, Eleanor closed the front door and leaned her forehead against the cool wood. Her hands were still shaking, but not from fear, from release. She had said it, out loud. No more hesitation, no more swallowing her pride. In the quiet, Eleanor glanced at the photo in her hands. Lisa, 10 years old. William's proud smile. She kissed the glass softly. "She's still in there somewhere, Will," she whispered. "But until she finds her way back, I'll protect what we built." She set the photo back on the mantel straighter than before and sat down in William's old chair. For the first time in weeks, Eleanor allowed herself to exhale. She wasn't moving, not an inch. The following Thursday evening, Eleanor Price was knitting in the living room when she heard the unmistakable sound of keys jingling at the front door. Her stomach clenched. Only 3 people had ever had a key, her William and Lisa. William was gone, and Eleanor certainly hadn't given Lisa or Mark permission to use hers. The lock clicked, and the door swung open. Mark walked in like he owned the place, with Lisa trailing reluctantly behind him. In his hand he carried a clipboard stacked with papers. "What are you doing with my key?" Eleanor demanded, rising from William's recliner. Lisa's voice was small. "Mom, I thought it would be easier if we—" Eleanor cut her off. "You gave him my house key?" Lisa's cheeks flushed crimson, but Mark didn't flinch. "Relax, Eleanor. We're here to speed up the process. Movers will be here Monday. We're making decisions for you since you're not capable of making them yourself." "That did it." Eleanor's voice was sharp as broken glass. "You're trespassing. Both of you. Get out!" Mark chuckled, stepping further inside. "You can't trespass in your own daughter's home. This place is already practically ours. Why don't you quit fighting and make it easier?" Lisa winced at the word ours, but she stayed silent. Eleanor squared her shoulders, her voice steady. "This is my house. I never signed a thing, and the 2 of you breaking in here like criminals just proved everything I suspected." Mark set the clipboard on the coffee table with a dramatic thud. "We've spoken with another attorney. If you won't sign voluntarily, we'll move forward with declaring you mentally incompetent. You'll lose the house either way." The words rang in the air like a gunshot. For a second, Eleanor felt her knees weaken. But then she remembered William's letter. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply stands and refuses to move. She pulled her phone from her cardigan pocket and began dialing. Mark sneered. "Who are you calling Lisa, look? Your mother's proving our point." Paranoid, confused. Eleanor didn't waver. When the dispatcher answered, she spoke clearly. "Yes, this is Eleanor Price, 70 years old. I live at 2114 Oakwood Drive. My daughter and her husband have entered my home without permission and are refusing to leave. I need an officer here immediately." Lisa's face went pale. "Mom? You didn't—" "I did," Eleanor said coldly. "Now both of you sit down and wait, or you can stand outside for the officers. Your choice." Mark's composure cracked for the first time. He glanced at Lisa, then back at Eleanor, fury simmering under his fake smile. "You wouldn't actually press charges." Eleanor locked eyes with him. "Try me." The room fell into a tense silence until flashing blue and red lights spilled across the front windows. 2 uniformed officers knocked firmly before stepping inside. "Evening, ma'am. You placed the call." "Yes," Eleanor said, steady as stone. "These 2 entered my house without permission. They claim I'm incompetent and that this house belongs to them. I want them removed." The officers turned to Mark. "Sir, do you have any legal documents showing you own this property?" Mark faltered. "Not yet, but she's not well and we're trying to—" "That's enough." One officer cut him off. "Unless you can show proof of ownership or a court order, this is breaking and entering. You need to leave. Now." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "Mom, please." Eleanor's expression softened for the briefest moment as she looked at her daughter, but then she straightened again. "Lisa, I love you. But love doesn't mean I'll let you or your husband walk all over me. Get out, both of you, and don't come back here without my permission." The officers escorted them outside. Mark muttered threats under his breath, but Eleanor stood tall in the doorway, watching until their car pulled away. When the house was finally quiet again, Eleanor locked the deadbolt and slid the chain into place. Her hands shook slightly, but it wasn't fear, it was adrenaline, relief. She sank back into William's chair, her heart pounding. This wasn't just a family squabble anymore. This was a legal fight, and thanks to William's foresight, she was armed for it. Pulling her phone back out, Eleanor dialed attorney Victoria Carter's number. When the line clicked, she didn't bother with pleasantries. "Victoria, it's Eleanor. They broke in tonight. The police removed them, but I need to take the next step. Whatever we have to file, whatever protections we can put in place, I'm ready. Victoria's voice was calm but firm. Good. Then we'll move forward tomorrow. It's time to show them the law is on your side. Eleanor closed her eyes, exhaling deeply. For the first time in weeks, she felt not just defensive but powerful. The line had been drawn, and this time it wasn't just emotional, it was legal. The morning after the police escorted Lisa and Mark out of her house, Eleanor Price arrived at Attorney Victoria Carter's office. The small downtown suite was lined with shelves of thick law books and certificates. Victoria, a sharp woman in her 40s with calm eyes and a reputation for being relentless in court, welcomed her with a firm handshake. "Mrs. Price," Victoria said, motioning her to sit, "you did exactly the right thing calling the police. That incident alone strengthens your position. But we're going to need more than that if this goes to court." Eleanor placed the thick folder of William's trust on the desk. "I found this last week. William left everything to me. He even added conditions about Lisa. If she ever tried to mistreat me or take advantage of me, she could be cut out." Victoria's eyes lit up as she flipped through the neatly organized documents. "Your husband was smart. This isn't just a will, it's a living trust. That means it's harder to challenge. And with this clause about undue influence, it's ironclad." Eleanor exhaled slowly, relief warming her chest. For days she'd felt cornered. Now for the first time she saw a path forward. Still, Victoria continued, "We need evidence of Mark's manipulation and Lisa's involvement. The court won't just take your word for it. Do you have anything? Notes, recordings, witnesses?" Eleanor opened her handbag and pulled out the small notebook she'd been keeping. She slid it across the desk. "I started writing everything down when they began accusing me of being forgetful. Every pill I took, every door I locked, every chore I did. It's all here." Victoria flipped through the pages, her lips curling into the faintest smile. "This is excellent. You've documented everything. A judge will see this and know you're not the confused, incompetent woman they're trying to paint you as." Eleanor's voice wavered. "Victoria, they said they'd try to have me declared mentally unfit. That terrified me." Victoria looked her straight in the eye. "Let them try. With this trust, your notebook, and the testimony of neighbors who've seen you running your own home, it'll backfire on them. Judges don't take kindly to children who prey on their parents." Over the next week, Victoria guided Eleanor through building her case. Together they called neighbors who had witnessed Mark's temper. Mrs. Henderson next door remembered hearing him yelling during Sunday visits. The mailman confirmed Eleanor walked the block daily without issue. Even the local pharmacist agreed to testify that Eleanor managed her medications responsibly and never showed signs of confusion. But the most damning evidence came from technology Eleanor barely understood. Victoria had subpoenaed phone records and found dozens of text messages between Lisa and Mark. Victoria read one aloud. "We'll convince her she's losing her memory. The stove thing is perfect." Eleanor's stomach twisted. So that's where that lie came from. Another text, "Don't let her talk to anyone alone. The more isolated she feels, the easier this will be." Lisa's name at the top of those messages made Eleanor's chest ache. Seeing her daughter's betrayal in black and white hurt more than anything Mark had ever said. Victoria placed a hand on hers. "I know this is painful, but it's powerful evidence. This shows a clear pattern of undue influence and coercion." Eleanor nodded slowly. "William saw through him. I just wish I had sooner." 2 weeks later, Victoria called Eleanor to her office again. "We've filed for a protective order. It bars Mark from coming within 100 feet of your home and prevents him from accessing any of your assets. Lisa is included by association, but I worded it carefully. If she distances herself from him, she has a chance to repair her standing with the court and with you if you choose." Eleanor felt both relief and sorrow. Relief that the law was finally on her side, sorrow that her own daughter was written into a document meant to protect her from harm. Victoria closed the folder with a decisive snap. "Mrs. Price, we're in a strong position. When this goes before a judge, Mark won't stand a chance. The question now is, are you ready for what comes with that? Because once this begins, there's no going back to the way things were." Eleanor folded her hands in her lap. Her voice was quiet but firm. "Victoria, they already destroyed the way things were. This is about protecting what's left and making sure no one else ever thinks I'm weak enough to steal from again." Victoria gave a single approving nod. "Then let's get ready for court." As Eleanor left the office, the cool autumn air brushed against her face. She paused on the steps, looking up at the crisp blue sky. For weeks she had felt like her world was closing in. Now for the first time, she felt it opening again. William had left her the tools. Victoria was giving her the strategy, and Eleanor had found her strength. The battle ahead would not be easy, but she was ready. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and polished marble, the kind of scent that carried both dignity and intimidation. Eleanor Price smoothed her skirt as she sat beside attorney Victoria Carter at the long oak defense table. Across the aisle, Mark and Lisa whispered furiously with their own attorney, a man in an expensive suit who looked more like a salesman than a defender of justice. Mark looked smug, as if he had already won. Lisa avoided Eleanor's eyes, her hands twisting the strap of her purse in nervous circles. "All rise," the bailiff called. Everyone stood as the judge entered. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. The nameplate read, "Honorable David Morales." Something stirred in her memory, the shy intern who used to fetch coffee at the family court office 30 years ago. Could it be Judge Morales adjusted his glasses and glanced down at the case file? But when his eyes lifted and landed on Eleanor, his expression froze. For a heartbeat, the courtroom felt utterly still. "It's her," he murmured, almost too softly to hear. Then, clearing his throat, he composed himself. "Be seated." Victoria leaned toward Eleanor. "Do you know him?" Eleanor whispered back. "I think so. From a long time ago." Mark's attorney launched into his argument first. He painted Eleanor as an unstable widow, too old and too forgetful to manage her affairs. He spoke of episodes with the stove, the garage door, her supposed paranoia. He claimed Mark and Lisa had stepped in only out of concern. Eleanor listened silently, her hands folded in her lap. She knew the tactic make her sound incompetent, helpless, and dependent, but this time she wasn't alone. When it was Victoria's turn, she rose with quiet confidence. "Your Honor, what we see here is not concern, it is coercion. It is elder abuse dressed up as filial duty." She produced Eleanor's notebook showing the detailed entries, every pill taken, every door locked, every chore completed. She called the pharmacist who testified Eleanor never missed a prescription. She called Mrs. Henderson, the neighbor who recounted Mark's shouting through the walls. The mailman confirmed Eleanor's daily walks sharp as ever. Finally, Victoria revealed the text messages. The words glowed on the screen projected for the court. "We'll convince her she's losing her memory. The stove thing is perfect." The room buzzed with murmurs. Mark's face drained of color. "Your Honor," Victoria said firmly, "this is not the behavior of loving children. This is a scheme to strip a woman of her dignity and her home." Judge Morales leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Eleanor. "Mrs. Price, I have one question for you. Do you feel capable of managing your own affairs?" Eleanor stood, her voice steady, despite the lump in her throat. "Yes, Your Honor. I have lived in my home for 40 years. I pay my bills, I cook my meals, I tend my garden. The only danger in my life has been the people sitting across from me, my daughter and her husband, trying to convince me I'm incapable so they can take what my late husband and I built." For a moment, the judge's stern face softened. He removed his glasses. "Mrs. Price, do you remember a young intern at the family court decades ago, a nervous kid who couldn't find the right files?" Eleanor's lips parted. "David Little." "David Morales. You were just a boy then, always doubting yourself." A faint smile crossed his face. "And you were the secretary who told me I was smarter than I believed. You helped me find my footing. I never forgot that." The courtroom was silent. Lisa's head dropped into her hands. Mark glared, realizing the tide had turned. Judge Morales straightened. His voice rang with authority. "There is no incompetence here, except on the part of those who thought they could manipulate this court. Mr. Mark Foster, your actions amount to coercion and attempted fraud. As for you, Mrs. Lisa Foster, your inheritance rights under the Price Family Trust are hereby suspended per its explicit terms." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Mark jumped to his feet. "This is outrageous. She's lying." "That trust is—" "Sit down," Judge Morales thundered. "This court will not tolerate further disrespect. The trust is valid. The evidence is overwhelming. And let me make one thing very clear. If either of you approaches Mrs. Price again without her consent, you will face criminal charges." Eleanor closed her eyes, relief washing over her like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. William had been right. Kindness returned when least expected. The gavel struck. Case dismissed. Outside the courthouse, reporters hovered, but Eleanor ignored them. She walked slowly down the steps, the autumn breeze lifting her silver hair. For the first time in years, Lisa hurried after her. Mom Lisa whispered, tears streaking her face. "I'm so sorry. I let him twist me into something I'm not. Can you ever forgive me?" Eleanor paused, studying her daughter. Behind the shame, she saw a flicker of the little girl who once called her a hero. "I don't know yet," Eleanor said honestly. "But today you saw who I really am, and maybe now you'll remember." Lisa nodded, sobbing quietly. Eleanor turned to look at the courthouse one last time. Justice had been served not just by the law, but by the circle of life itself. The days following the trial felt strangely quiet for Eleanor Price. For weeks, her home had been filled with arguments, threats, and the heavy presence of betrayal. Now, with Mark barred by court order and Lisa stripped of her rights under the trust, the house was hers again. She brewed coffee in her chipped mug each morning, watered her violets by the window, and walked 2 laps around the block. It should have felt like victory, but victory had a bitter aftertaste. The silence of the house reminded her not just of William's absence, but of the fragile bond with her only daughter. 3 days after the ruling, the doorbell rang. Eleanor's heart skipped. When she opened the door, Lisa stood there alone, clutching a small paper bag. "Mom," Lisa said softly, her voice raw, I brought your jewelry back." She held out the bag, the same one she had once stuffed carelessly with Eleanor's wedding ring, her mother's gold chain, and the anniversary earrings William had given her. This time, Lisa's hands trembled as she offered it. Eleanor accepted the bag but didn't step aside. "Why now?" she asked, her tone even. Lisa swallowed hard. "Because I need you to know. I'm not proud of what I did. I let Mark convince me you were weak, that you'd be safer if we took control. But the truth is, I liked the idea of that house, of the money. I let myself believe lies because they were easier than admitting the truth about my marriage." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "And the truth was that Mark controlled me." Lisa admitted, her voice breaking. "He told me what to wear, who to talk to, even how to think about you. And I let him. I hurt you because I was too afraid to stand up to him." For the first time in months, Eleanor saw her daughter's face stripped of arrogance and excuses. There was only exhaustion, shame, and a desperate hope for forgiveness. "I can't forget what you did," Eleanor said slowly. "You tried to put me out of my own home. You treated me like a burden instead of your mother." Lisa's tears spilled over. "I know, and I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. But Mom, I don't have anyone else. Mark is gone. I'm 5 months pregnant, and I need my mother." The words cracked something in Eleanor's heart. She stepped back just slightly. "Come in." Inside, Lisa sat at the kitchen table where so many battles had been fought. She traced her finger over the embroidered tablecloth, once dismissed as old-fashioned, now studied with quiet reverence. Eleanor set 2 cups of tea on the table. For a while they sat in silence, steam curling between them. Finally, Lisa spoke. "I want to change, Mom. I want to raise this baby differently. With respect. With love. The kind of love you gave me when I was little." Eleanor searched her daughter's face. "Change doesn't come with words, Lisa. It comes with choices. Consistency. You'll have to earn my trust back piece by piece." Lisa nodded quickly. "I will. I'll do whatever it takes." Eleanor's gaze softened, but only slightly. "Then start by being honest with yourself, with me. No more lies, no more excuses." Lisa reached across the table, her hand hovering before finally resting gently over her mother's. "I'm so sorry, Mom, truly." Eleanor didn't pull away, but she didn't clasp her daughter's hand either. Instead, she looked down at the wedding ring in the bag beside her and thought of William's words. "Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply stands." That evening, after Lisa left, Eleanor sat in William's chair with the jewelry box open on her lap. She slipped on the earrings he had given her so long ago. In the reflection of the window, she saw not just herself, but the woman William had believed in, the one strong enough to protect what mattered, yet still tender enough to consider forgiveness. Her heart was cautious, her trust fractured. But maybe, just maybe, the shards could be pieced back together in time. As she closed the jewelry box, Eleanor whispered into the quiet room, "I'm not ready to forgive her yet, Will. But I'm willing to watch, to see if she finds her way back." The house, once heavy with tension, now held a fragile hope. Not a happy ending, not yet, but the first fragile step toward healing. Winter had settled deep over Oakwood Drive by the time the phone call came. The trees outside Eleanor Price's window were bare, their branches laced with frost. She was sipping tea when the shrill ring startled her. It was Lisa. "Mom," her voice trembled. "It's time. I'm at the hospital. Please, please come." For a moment, Eleanor's chest tightened. Memories of betrayal flashed, boxes in her living room, lies about the stove, the humiliation of being treated like a child. She almost said no. Almost. But then she thought of William's letter of the unborn grandchild who had no part in the sins of the parents. "I'll be there," she said, her voice steady. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and possibility. Eleanor walked briskly down the hall, her heels clicking softly against the tile. When she entered the room, Lisa lay in bed, her face pale but radiant, clutching the handrail with one hand and her swollen belly with the other. Mom, Lisa whispered, tears filling her eyes. Eleanor didn't speak. She simply walked to her daughter's side and clasped her free hand. It was sweaty, trembling, but alive. For the next few hours they breathed together, Lisa through the waves of contractions, Eleanor through decades of pain and love entwined. When the newborn's cry pierced the air, Eleanor felt her heart split wide open. The nurse placed a tiny girl, red-faced and squirming, in Lisa's arms. "Meet Serenity." "Grace," Lisa whispered, her voice cracking. Eleanor leaned closer, tears spilling freely. The baby's fingers curled instinctively around hers, impossibly small and impossibly strong. In that instant, something inside Eleanor shifted. Betrayal still lingered, wounds still raw, but the innocence of this child washed over her like sunlight on frozen ground. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor found herself visiting often. At first, she told herself it was only to help with the baby. She cooked meals, folded laundry, and gently rocked Serenity so Lisa could rest. But little by little, the wall between mother and daughter began to crack. One night, after Eleanor had stayed late to soothe Serenity through a stubborn bout of colic, Lisa poured them both a cup of tea. Her hands shook as she set the cups down. "Mom," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I don't deserve your kindness. After everything I did, I wouldn't blame you if you hated me." Eleanor studied her daughter. She saw the exhaustion in Lisa's eyes, but also something new: humility, a willingness to be seen without excuses. "I did hate you for a while," Eleanor admitted honestly. "I hated what you became with him. I hated how you made me feel small in my own home." She reached across the table and laid her hand gently over Lisa's. "But hate doesn't build anything. Love does. And I don't want Serenity to grow up in a family chained by bitterness." Lisa broke down, sobbing into her hands. "I want to do better, Mom. I want to be like you, strong but kind. I want her to grow up knowing her grandmother as the woman who never gave up, not the woman I betrayed." Eleanor's throat tightened. "Then show her, day by day, choice by choice." By spring, life had settled into a new rhythm. Eleanor still lived in her house on Oakwood Drive, tending her violets and sitting in William's chair each evening. But her days now brimmed with fresh purpose. Lisa often brought Serenity to visit the baby's laughter, filling the once silent rooms. Neighbors noticed the change. "You look 10 years younger," Mrs. Henderson remarked one morning as Eleanor watered the violets. Eleanor just smiled, knowing the truth. It wasn't youth she had regained, but peace. Still, scars remained. Trust was not rebuilt overnight. There were moments Eleanor caught Lisa staring at the house with longing, moments that made her wary. But then Lisa would turn back to her mother with tired but honest eyes, and Eleanor would see sincerity instead of greed. One warm afternoon, Eleanor and Lisa sat together in the garden while Serenity played on a blanket in the grass. "Mom," Lisa said softly, "do you think Dad would forgive me?" Eleanor's gaze drifted to the violets, their purple blooms glowing in the sunlight. Your father believed forgiveness wasn't something we earn. It's something we grow into. He'd want you to learn from your mistakes, not drown in them. Lisa nodded, tears shining in her eyes. I'm trying, Mom. I really am. Eleanor reached over, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. I know, and I see it. Serenity giggled, then waving her tiny arms as a butterfly danced above her head. The sound was pure, untainted by the shadows of the past. Eleanor scooped her granddaughter into her lap, holding her close. You know what I realized? Lisa Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion. This little one, she's our second chance. Yours and mine. We don't have to be perfect. We just have to do better than we did yesterday. Lisa leaned against her mother's shoulder, a quiet sob escaping. I love you, Mom. Eleanor kissed Serenity's soft hair, then looked at her daughter with a gaze both firm and tender. And I love you, Lisa. Always. Even when I didn't like you, even when you broke my heart, I never stopped loving you. That night, back in her own house, Eleanor sat in William's chair with Serenity's laughter still echoing in her ears. She opened his letter once more, running her fingers over the words. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply stands and refuses to move. She smiled through her tears. She had stood. She had refused to move. And because of that, she still had her home, her dignity, and slowly returning her daughter. Forgiveness hadn't erased the past, but it was planting seeds for the future, seeds that, like her violets, would bloom again with time. Eleanor whispered into the quiet house, We're going to be all right, Will. She's finding her way back, and I'll be here to guide her. For the first time in a long while, Eleanor truly believed it. Spring sunlight spilled across the garden, glinting off the dew that clung to Eleanor Price's violets. She sat in William's old chair, Serenity curled up in her lap, listening to the soft laughter drifting from the kitchen where Lisa prepared lunch. The road behind them had been rocky betrayal, humiliation, courtrooms, and tears, but now, for the first time in years, the house felt alive with peace. Eleanor glanced down at her granddaughter, whose tiny fingers curled tightly around hers. In that simple grip, she felt a truth greater than wealth, greater than property deeds or court rulings, the power of love restored, of dignity preserved. William's words from the letter echoed once more. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply stands. And now, with the memory of his wisdom guiding her, Eleanor remembered a verse that had carried her through sleepless nights. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. Proverbs 31:25. Those words had never felt truer. She had stood when the world tried to shove her down. She had kept her dignity when others sought to strip it away. And now she could finally smile at the future because she knew who she was and whose she was. Later that evening, as twilight settled over Oakwood Drive, Eleanor and Lisa sat together on the porch, Serenity gurgling in a bassinet between them. The air was filled with the sweet scent of lilacs. Lisa's voice was hesitant, but earnest. "Mom," she said, "do you ever think you'll fully forgive me?" Eleanor looked out at the fading horizon before answering. "Forgiveness isn't a single moment, Lisa. It's a journey. I can't erase what happened. But I can choose every day not to let bitterness rule my heart. That's what God asks of us. To forgive not because the other person deserves it, but because love demands it." Tears shimmered in Lisa's eyes. "I want to earn that love back, Mom. For you, for Serenity." Eleanor finally turned to face her daughter, her gaze steady and kind. "Then live differently. Raise her with respect, with compassion, with honesty. Show her that mistakes don't define us, what we do after does." As the first stars appeared, Eleanor felt a deep calm settle over her. The home she fought so fiercely to protect had become more than a building again. It was a sanctuary, a place of healing, a reminder that God's promises were not just words on a page, but living truths. She thought of all the older women who might be sitting alone right now, feeling powerless, convinced their voices didn't matter. She wished she could gather them all on this porch and tell them, "You are stronger than you think. You are clothed in dignity. Don't let anyone, child, spouse, or stranger, convince you otherwise. Stand firm, because the Lord has already placed strength within you. That was the real heart of her story. Not the money, not the court case, not even the shocking twist that Judge Morales remembered her kindness from decades before. The real victory was realizing her worth had never depended on anyone else's approval. It had always come from God, from the years of sacrifice, from the love that endured through betrayal. Holding serenity against her chest, Eleanor whispered softly, "Her true stories will be different. She will grow up knowing strength, not fear, dignity, not shame, respect, not control." The baby sighed contentedly as if agreeing. Eleanor looked back at Lisa, who watched the scene with quiet reverence. "This is our second chance," Eleanor said. "Let's not waste it." And now, dear listener, as you've walked through Eleanor's journey with me, I want to turn to you. Maybe you faced betrayal by someone close. Maybe you've been told you're too weak, too old, or too insignificant to stand up for yourself. Remember Eleanor's story. Remember Proverbs 31:25. You are clothed with strength and dignity, and you too can laugh at the days to come. If this touched you, share it with someone who needs encouragement. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from, because when we share her true stories, we remind the world that the voices of mothers, grandmothers, and women of faith still matter, still inspire, and still change lives. Eleanor's victory was not in the courtroom alone. It was in her heart, where forgiveness grew, where dignity stood, and where love proved stronger than betrayal. And so can yours.